Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the mountains, there lived a young girl named Ava. She was a curious and adventurous soul, always eager to explore the world around her. But there was one thing that held her back: her fear of the dark. For as long as she could remember, Ava had been terrified of the dark. Whenever the sun set and the shadows grew long, she would retreat to her room and huddle under her blankets, trembling with fear. Her parents tried everything they could think of to help her overcome her fear, but nothing seemed to work. One day, Ava's grandfather came to visit. He was a wise old man who had traveled the world and seen many things. When he learned of Ava's fear of the dark, he smiled and said, "I know just the thing to help you, my dear." He took Ava by the hand and led her out into the woods that surrounded the village. It was a beautiful day, with the sun shining bright and the birds singing in the trees. But as the afternoon wore on, the shadows began to lengthen and the woods grew darker. Ava's heart began to race as she looked around, but her grandfather simply smiled and kept walking. "Don't worry, my dear," he said. "I am here with you, and I will keep you safe." They walked deeper and deeper into the woods, and soon the sun had set and the moon had risen. Ava's fear was almost overwhelming, but her grandfather's presence gave her strength. They came to a clearing where a small stream flowed, and her grandfather motioned for her to sit down beside him. "Close your eyes, Ava," he said, "and listen." At first, Ava heard only the sounds of the woods at night: the rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects, the hooting of an owl. But then, she began to hear something else, a faint humming that seemed to be coming from the stream. "Can you hear it?" her grandfather asked. Ava nodded, her eyes still closed. "That is the sound of the water flowing over the rocks," he said. "It is a gentle, soothing sound that can calm even the most fearful heart. Listen to it, and let it fill you up." Ava took a deep breath and listened to the sound of the stream. Slowly her heart rate began to slow, and her fear began to dissipate. She opened her eyes and looked around, and for the first time in a long time, she was not afraid of the dark. From that day on, Ava visited the stream every night. She would close her eyes and listen to the sound of the water flowing over the rocks, and she felt a sense of peace and calm wash over her. She was still afraid of the dark, but she no longer felt alone in it. Years passed, and Ava grew up to be a strong and independent woman. She traveled the world, seeing new places and meeting new people. But no matter where she went, she always carried with her the memory of her grandfather's wisdom and the sound of the stream. One day, she received word that her grandfather had passed away. She returned to the village for his funeral, and afterwards she walked out into the woods to the spot where they had sat together so many years before. She sat down by the stream and closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the water flowing over the rocks. And then she heard something else, a faint humming that seemed to be coming from the trees. She opened her eyes and looked around, and she saw that the trees were filled with fireflies, their soft light illuminating the darkness. She smiled, remembering her grandfather's words. "The darkness is nothing to be afraid of, Ava," she whispered to herself. "It's just a canvas for the light." In that moment, Ava realized that her fear of the dark had been holding her back all these years. She had been afraid of the unknown, of what might lurk in the shadows. But now, she saw that the darkness was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. It was a canvas for the light, a space where beauty and magic could unfold. With that realization, Ava felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She stood up and looked around, seeing the world in a new light. She knew that there would still be times when she felt afraid, but now she had the strength and wisdom to face those fears and move forward. As she walked back to the village, she felt a sense of peace and joy fill her heart. She knew that her grandfather was still with her, guiding her and encouraging her every step of the way, and she knew that she would carry his wisdom with her always, like a light shining in the darkness.